How do you stop feeling triggered by your partner? Excellent question, and I've asked myself this many times in the last years, and hopefully in this video I help you answer this question. Now, it is not a clickbait video, however, I do have to tell you that it is virtually impossible to never feel triggered by your partner, and I'm sorry, this is probably not what you want to hear. You literally want to know how to not feel triggered by your partner, and then this lady right here is telling you that it'll virtually never happen. But hear me out before you click away. It is virtually impossible to never feel triggered by your partner. However, what we can do is we can understand our triggers, and then firstly, we can learn how to better cope with them. And second of all, we can understand where they're coming from, so hopefully we get to fully resolve them. Romantic relationships, the way I see them, serves as a mirror for us to have a deeper look at ourselves. So our partner is reflecting a lot of things about ourselves to ourselves, so we get to look at them and hopefully work on them and then resolve them. It is not easy, however, being in a romantic relationship, that is one of the most intimate relationships we'll ever be in. We spend a lot of time with our partner sees the best and the worst of us, and at the same time we see the best and the worst of our partners. So it is inevitable that we'll get triggered, but I really believe that romantic relationships especially are like a ground for personal development and really understanding ourselves, our behaviors, and resolving things that perhaps we didn't have chance to resolve earlier. First of all, what does it mean to feel triggered? From a psychological perspective, being triggered refers to experiencing a strong emotional reaction. Typically, it may be negative. So something happens, you feel triggered, and you may experience sadness, fear, or anger. From a more, let's say, spiritual perspective, feeling triggered can serve as an invitation for us to look within ourselves and see where we can grow and where we can heal something that perhaps we haven't healed yet. So in both instances, the trigger itself is a negative emotion, it doesn't feel good, yet at the same time, it's an invitation for us to grow, evolve, and inspect where the trigger may be coming from and see what could potentially be healed. There is a book that I read 3 years ago called Getting the Love You Want, and I wanted to read a quote from it because it really beautifully encapsulates the power of being in a romantic relationship. Love heals all is a well-known sentiment, and it can. It can even heal the deepest emotional wound of all, the ruptured connection between you and your parents. But it needs to be a specific kind of love. It needs to be a mature, patient love that is free of manipulation and distortion, and it needs to take place within the context of an intimate relationship. Receiving empathy from a friend may be very moving, but it does not reach all the way down into our psyche. In order to heal the painful experiences of the past, you need to receive love from a person whom your unconscious mind has merged with your childhood caregivers. I know that it's not a very sexy notion of, thinking of our partner and then wondering how they are linked to our unresolved issues with our caretakers, but in my own experience, I've really seen that a lot of things within, let's say, my family dynamic that I was doing as a kid, or certain things that were not resolved, they got transferred into my romantic relationship. And it is my responsibility, of course, to now look at it and resolve it, because a lot of wounds get created within relationships, but also those wounds can also be healed and resolved within relationships as well. So I wanted to share with you 3 tools that I've been using in the last 3 years with my therapist and without my therapist that have really helped me deal with triggers that come up within my romantic relationship. Inner child work. The concept of inner child refers to the vulnerable emotional and psychological part of ourselves that we've carried from childhood to adulthood. And a lot of the fears that we may have, a lot of the conflicts that we may deal with can arise because we've neglected our inner child. I was first introduced to the concept 3 years ago when I started working with my therapist, and inner child, hands down, has been one of the most profound ways I've been able to not only understand my triggers, but also deal with my triggers. If you've never done inner child work before, it can be a little bit intimidating because maybe it sounds a little woo-woo of you having to reconnect with, the 5 or the 6-year-old within you. However, what I've noticed throughout my life is that adults are really just big babies, and there are very few real emotionally grown adults, because a lot of us have these wounds, right, that we haven't dealt with from childhood, and then we just grow up, and yes, we have older bodies and fancy, grown-up jobs, but psychologically and emotionally we still feel like the child that we were. So through inner child, first with my therapist, but now doing inner child work just myself, I've really been able to not only give a voice to the inner child, but also understand where a lot of my overreactions come from. And I've also been able to soothe that inner child. If you've never done inner child work before, it might be a little bit intimidating and you may not know where to start. So you can always start with something like journaling and connecting with your inner child through pen and paper. I have some journaling prompts available if you're interested, but I think that's always a very nice step to reconnect with that part of you. And one practice that I've been doing for the last couple of years is specifically when I get triggered, and that is to validate my inner child's emotions and at the same time make that inner child feel safe. So for example, I will get really triggered and I will struggle to regulate my emotions. And primarily when I get triggered, I feel a lot of fear, almost like this panic state, and I feel a lot of anxiety. So what I will do is I will go into the bedroom, I'll close the door, I will sit on the bed, I will close my eyes, and then I will put my hand on my heart, and I will take a couple of deep breaths just to try and calm myself down. And then I will ask my inner child what's going on. I'll say, hey, I understand that you're feeling very triggered right now. You may be feeling scared, but just tell me what's going on. Tell me what's coming up for you. There's 2 ways that I get an answer from my inner child. Either it's like a stream of thoughts, right? Where it's kind of like I'm answering my own self. So I'm gonna have a lot of thoughts of, I'm feeling so scared. I'm scared I'm gonna feel abandoned. I don't know what to do. I feel completely out of control and I feel uncertain. I'm just really scared I'll be abandoned. So it might come in through like a stream of thoughts. Or sometimes what happens is when I ask my child, what's going on, how do you feel? I'll just start crying and sobbing and maybe shaking because it feels like this physical release. So it comes in 2 ways. After I have the thoughts or I physically release some of the stress, I will validate my inner child and I will say it is completely normal that you feel this way. I understand why you feel this way. It's okay that you feel these emotions. So that's the validation part, because I never want to make my inner child feel like, they're doing something wrong or you shouldn't feel this way. So I will validate the feelings and then I will reassure the inner child and make them feel safe. So I will say, I am here for you. I understand that you feel scared. I understand that you feel that you may be abandoned. However, I just want to reassure you that you are safe. I'm here. I'm an adult now. I can take care of you. And no matter what happens, I'm never gonna leave. I'm here. You are protected by me. And that always soothes me. So this is one exercise that I've been doing for quite a while, and it has worked wonders. It has helped me understand deeper where my triggers are coming from. So I may be thinking that I'm really triggered about this specific thing, but then I go and I sit with my inner child and I understand that it's something completely different, mostly motivated by fear. And then I get to validate their emotions and calm them down. So a really great place to start to understand your triggers that come up within the container of your romantic relationship is to do inner child work. A second tool that has been useful for me the last 13 years inside of my romantic relationship and outside of it is journaling. I've been talking so much about journaling. I have classes about journaling. It is my favorite practice to date because it has helped me most understand myself. And specifically when it comes to triggers, journaling has been really vital in, like I mentioned, understanding my thoughts, understanding my emotions, but at the same time, seeing as time goes on if there are any patterns. So journaling for me looks like a lot of different things. Sometimes I'll use prompt journaling, other times I will just free write, and a lot of the times when I'm upset and I need to get something off my chest, I will just go and I'll rant into my journal. I will write everything that I'm feeling. Sometimes I even use all capital letters and really, really big, and I say I am so freaking mad about this thing. And it feels very cathartic. It feels like a cathartic release. So if you've never tried journaling, as I mentioned before, it is a great place to start to understand yourself, whether it is within the concept of inner child work or whether it's just understanding, your triggers and what you're upset about. And as time goes on, you're able to look back at your entries and see if there is like a red thread. Are there certain triggers that are consistently coming up, and are you seeing that they come up in the same situations? It is very, very interesting to try and see a pattern. Like I always say, become the researcher of your own self, and I really take on this role of being an inner researcher. And I really, really believe in that. We have to investigate ourselves. We have to look at all of these different variables, see when they come up, how often they repeat themselves. And journaling is a really powerful practice for that. There are a lot of different ways through which you can journal. You can use prompt journaling, which means that you are presented with different prompts that you have to answer the question or you have to kind of fill in the prompt. You can have a 5-minute journaling practice where you just set a timer for 5 minutes and then write about anything and everything that comes up. You can also use sort of like art journaling where you draw and you doodle your emotions. And then you can use therapeutic journaling, which is sort of like this cathartic release and asking yourself the deeper questions and really investigating specific thoughts or triggers through the art of journaling. So if you've never tried journaling, or if you've tried it before but haven't done it in a while, I really, really recommend you doing this practice, specifically when you get triggered by your romantic partner. Last but not least, since we are talking about triggers in a relationship, it is important to discuss your triggers with your partner. I think it's quite uncommon to see within a relationship two individuals discussing triggers in like a very calm environment. So sure, you're gonna get into arguments and fights with your partner, but then it's important when you are both in a very calm and emotionally stable place to talk about your triggers and analyze the triggers. I've been very fortunate that within my relationship, me and my partner, we've been really able to go deep within both of our triggers and analyze it and understand where both people are coming from. And we've developed 3 different practices that help us deal with the triggers that come up. First of all, having a weekly or a bi-weekly check-in. We have had this, I think, for the last 2.5 years. We have a shared calendar on our phones, and we have an event that repeats every 2 weeks on a Saturday, and the event is called the bi-weekly check-in. So it is important to discuss things on a regular basis, whether things are going well or they're not going that well. And specifically when life gets busy, it's easy to not spend the time and dedicate the time to discuss what is coming up for each person. So that's why, as a reminder, we have in our calendar every 2 weeks an event that comes up, and then we look at it and we say, hey, do you want to discuss something? It happens that certain times everything is going perfectly well, so we'll just say, yeah, I don't have anything specific to share. Okay, we can skip this one. But other times it really turns into long conversations about certain triggers that might have come up in the last couple of weeks. Analyzing an argument. So I talk about the idea of being a researcher of your own self. And I think when it comes to arguing, it's almost like watching a replay of a basketball game, right? If you're a coach, the game is going on however it is going on, but afterwards, if you want to learn from it, you need to go back, rewatch it, analyze it, and see what you could have done differently. So if me and my partner will have a fight, after we've both calmed down, we'll come back together and we will analyze what went wrong, or maybe not necessarily wrong, but like what came up and how we dealt with it. And we'll say, okay, first of all, we were both tired, maybe we were both hungry, so overall the context already was not great because we're not in the best emotional states. And then we will try and analyze it. Was it something that you said that I misinterpreted and I took personally? So we will go through the argument, what both people said, how we interpreted the situations, and where we might have miscommunicated. And I think it is vital. So I really suggest that you analyze an argument with your partner. And I do have to say a disclaimer that it really takes one person to break the pattern, right? It takes one person also to begin establishing these practices. And I've been very fortunate that my partner is very proactive in, communication and understanding, where we're both coming from. So I have more challenges with speaking up and communicating. So he is usually the one that's like, hey, I can feel something's up, like let's evaluate it, let's talk about it, because it's harder for me to bring it up. So if you are currently not doing this in your partnership, it might be that you need to take the more lead role and, propose to your partner, hey, can we sit down and like talk about, an argument we had last week and what went wrong and how we could have dealt with it differently. Or maybe your partner is already doing it with you. So really in the dynamic, one person can always be the more, let's say, motivated one and the more proactive individual to bring up these practices or suggest something like a weekly or a bi-weekly check-in. Last but not least, it's very similar to the check-in. It's really an impromptu heart-to-heart. Sometimes something will happen throughout the day, let's say, where I feel triggered and the trigger is very one-sided. So it's up to me to communicate it with my partner so they are aware of it. So something might happen and I might say, hey, can we have like a pause? I really want to talk to you about something. You said XYZ. It made me feel really not a great way. Maybe I don't understand it right. Maybe that's not what you meant, but this is how I'm currently feeling. So can we like clear the air, because I don't want to keep feeling this way. So this is more like an ongoing impromptu conversation about immediately catching the trigger and communicating with our partner, so the resentment or the discomfort doesn't build up. Because I'm sure we've all been in a situation where you feel triggered about something, you don't communicate it to your partner, and then it grows and grows and grows until an individual explodes, and then it's like, whoa, where did that come from? And how come you didn't tell me earlier? And you've just let it build up throughout the days or the weeks. Being in a romantic relationship with another complex human being is not easy. However, it can be so rewarding, and we can truly have the love and the relationships that we desire if we are willing to put in the work. I really have grown so much and learned so much through my triggers. And even though it's uncomfortable, it's annoying, and it doesn't, feel good, it has been the places which have provided me with the most insight about myself, and also the places through which I have grown more and more. So once again, triggers are normal within a relationship, and even though the triggers might come up as a result of somebody else saying something or do something, it is our responsibility to investigate it, check in with ourselves, and really understand where they're coming from and to address them. Thank you for watching the video. I would love to hear from you, and maybe there are certain practices that you've already done to address and work through triggers that come up in romantic relationships. If so, let me know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.